Welcome to a Kaiser Permanente Live Well, Be Well video presentation of Healthy Pleasures, the New Science of Happiness by Dr. David Sobel. Dr. Sobel is the Medical Director of Regional Health Education for the Permanente Medical Group and Kaiser Permanente in Northern California. He's a practicing primary care physician at the Kaiser Permanente Medical Center in San Jose, author of 8 books, including Healthy Pleasures, the Mind and Body Health Handbook, The Healing Brain, and Living a Healthy Life with Chronic Conditions. He's also received the Honorary Fellow Award from the Society for Public Health Education, the TPMG Exceptional Contribution Award, as well as the Kaiser Permanente Vose Award for Quality. Dr. Sobel's more than 200 television appearances to educate the public about health issues include The Today Show, CNN, and Hour magazine. His healthiest pleasures include adventure travel with his wife and son.
You know, I thought I would start our discussion today of healthy pleasures by telling you about a study I came across. And it focused on what happens to people's minds during public lectures and presentations. And it's quite interesting. About a third of the audience will pay strict, rapt attention to almost everything that the speaker says. Another third will kind of fade in and out. You know, you'll show up for a while. You'll be thinking about all your email that's piling up, what you had for lunch, what you're going to get for dinner, and you'll fade in and out. The most interesting is actually the final third. And during the whole hour presentation, their minds did not show up at all. They were virtually absent. And when they analyzed the results, they found out that their minds were engaged in intense sexual fantasies throughout the presentation. Now, I actually find that pretty reassuring as a presenter because I know at least a third of you are going to have a good time over the next hour. And my job is to work with the other 2/3. The other thing I'll warn you about is I know from reading the study how to interpret very subtle nonverbal cues to know which of those categories you're in. So watch what you're thinking. So the start of healthy pleasures is really, how do we maintain work-life balance? And they asked Gandhi one time. He worked for 15 hours a day for 50 years. And one of his assistants came to him one time and they said, "Mr. Gandhi, you are working so hard. Why don't you take a vacation?" Gandhi's response was very interesting. He said, "I'm always on vacation." Now, I don't know about you, but, you know, when I'm working in the clinic seeing patients, I'm working really hard, it doesn't exactly feel like a vacation to me. And I want you to consider your life. When you're working, is it always like a vacation? Well, for those of us who are not quite saint-like Gandhi, I think we need some other ways to get work-life balance and to manage stress. And so let's focus on those. So what are your options for managing stress? Well, the first thing is you can reduce exposure to stressors. Good luck. Yeah, I don't know about you, but again, I've noticed that the stressors don't seem to be going down. And in fact, the more labor-saving devices and electronic technology we have, it seems like the demands are actually increasing. So I think there are some things you can do to reduce exposure to stressors, but truthfully, you're going to do more than that. So you're going to need to practice some effective coping strategies, and we'll go over some of those things. And the nice thing about the things I'm going to share with you, these are not things you save up for a vacation or save up for the weekend. These are very small things you can do continuously throughout the day. And finally, no matter how good you are at managing stress, you need some downtime. You need some time to really recharge, restore yourself, and we'll be focusing on some of the simple, easy, pleasurable restoring activities that bring back some of that balance. So that's kind of where we're going. Now, whenever I deal with this area of mind-body medicine or thriving or happiness, I I'm always challenged by how do I get people to take this seriously? Okay? I mean, is it fluffy stuff? Is it kind of soft, squishy? Especially around my medical colleagues, this is a challenge. So I know that people take drugs seriously. Now, don't quote me on that. Don't tweet me on that. I don't mean that they take drugs seriously. I mean they regard medication seriously. All right. So I wondered what would happen if there were a new medication that came out in the physician's desk reference. That's the book that has all the side effects and adverse reactions and dosages of medications. Well, what if the generic name of this new drug were Thrive? But it came in a variety of brand names. You know, sometimes it was called Live Well, Be Well, or Healthy Living, perhaps Wellness, Health Promotion, Health Education, Patient Education, Prevention, Behavioral Health Education, Mind-Body Medicine, or even Healthy Pleasures. What if we looked at it as if it were a drug? So what if I told you there was a drug that could be given to people that improves their mood? Hey, it even increases work-life balance and satisfaction. This drug is very versatile. It can also reduce the overall risk of mortality, especially from cancer and heart disease. Certain stress hormones are reduced by it. It'll boost certain measures of immune function, reduces pain, anxiety, and depression. And guess what? If you take this drug and you're in the hospital, there's evidence that you get out of the hospital quicker and get back home. What if the drug also had very rare or few side effects? In fact, the major side effect is people said, you know, I'm in a better mood. I like this drug. I'd like some more of it. And it's a very versatile drug. It's very inexpensive. It's readily available. It's all around us, actually. It can be dosed on a PRN or as-needed basis. It can be applied through print. That's like bibliotherapy, classes, online tools, telephone, all the technologies. And guess what? This is a drug that can be prescribed without a license. Now, the tricky thing is, as a physician, I can't send all my patients off to the pharmacy to fill this drug. And the reason is that this is a drug that is prescribed and filled in the pharmacy of the brain itself. And we'll talk about how each of you can do that. So the problem is the medical culture doesn't support healthy pleasures all the time. And in fact, here's a conversation between a doctor and a patient, and it says, Henry, there's no improvement. Are you sure you've given up everything that you enjoy? You know, sometimes I feel like a medical terrorist, you know, and that's if any of my patients come in and they happen to be enjoying something, I'll find some reason to, you know, tell them that's not good for them. At the minimum, it's probably fattening. It may even be contagious. Watch out. It turns out that we really are almost like health fascists. That is, we prescribe all these arduous regimens and disciplines and so on, and we've almost forgotten how to enjoy life and at the same time improve our health. So, a few cautions and caveats before I get into the evidence and before I take you on this little journey. Caution number one. When dealing with this area, a mentor of mine once said to me, you know something, you need to keep an open mind, but not so open that your brains fall out. And that's why I'm going to stay pretty close to the evidence and the science of happiness and what's actually been proven to work. The second one is bad things happen to good people. I mean, even if you're happy, you're optimistic, you're joyful, you're altruistic, you're having a grand time in life, you care about others, guess what? Bad things still happen. You know, people get cancer, they have heart disease, they get in automobile accidents. Now, it turns out the evidence suggests that if you're a more positive, joyous, optimistic, happy person, those things tend to happen a little bit less. But we have to avoid victim blaming and the magical thinking that, oh, if I just think happy thoughts, life is going to be perfect. The third is sometimes happiness can be unhelpful. It may sound strange at first because I'm going to talk about happiness and joy and so on. But there are studies now that show that depending upon your goals and what you want to accomplish, you may be better off not being in the happiest top category, but maybe just a half step lower. And that is, if you want to make a higher income, to get a job promotion, or be politically active, it turns out that those people are the people who are just a half step below the happiest. And that makes sense, because if you are completely happy and content in your life, you don't really necessarily have that drive or the motivation to make things better. So I'm not arguing, don't put yourself down at the bottom, okay? But don't feel like you have to be perfect. And in fact, negative emotions, anger, can actually be positive because it moves us to action. And where there are a lot of things in the world we should be angry about, and we should work to change. And also, the nice, reassuring thing about this is you don't have to be perfect. And I find that really reassuring, because the surest way not to be happy is to pursue perfect happiness. It's almost a guaranteed prescription. So though I'm going to focus on happiness, I want to let you know life is much fuller than that, and enjoy your whole range of emotions. All right, so here's a little quiz for you. I want you to think about the last hour or so. And I want to say, in the past hour, have you smiled or laughed a lot or felt really happy? Okay? This is a scale of 1 to 10. 10 is you are so happy that I don't know why you bothered tuning in or coming here today. You should have stayed where you were. I mean, it was so much fun. Why give that up to come to a talk on happiness? Okay? That's a 10. And by the way, I want to find out your secret. I want to know how you did it. Number 1 is you were so down and depressed that I hope you'll come and talk to me or somebody that you trust right after so that we can get you some help. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I want you to either mark down or remember what your answer is, because we're going to come back to that, okay? Somewhere along that continuum. Got it? Everybody got a number? Okay. So the question we might ask is, great, happy is fun, but is it healthier? Because we're really talking about healthy pleasures. Well, it turns out people who answer the question during the past 4 weeks, have you been a happy person? Or, all things considered, how satisfied are you with your life? Well, when those people are studied and then they're followed over a 2-year period, those who are higher in life satisfaction and happiness, they report later 50% fewer chronic health problems that interfere with their lives. So there's some evidence there. Then there's the famous nun study. Have you heard about this? This is interesting. They took the journals that nuns wrote when they were 20 years old. And 20, 30, 40 years later, they analyzed those journals for themes in it. And it turns out those who expressed in their autobiographies more happiness, more love, more joy, they were 2.5 times lower risk of dying than their gloomier counterparts. And this is 20, 30, 40 years later. So I don't think you have to become a nun to benefit from this study, okay? But there's something about happiness that seems to predict future health. And in fact, when they looked at people who express a lot of positive emotion, joy, cheerfulness, enthusiasm, at least in one study, they were 22% less likely to have developed heart disease, and another study showed that they were 50% lower mortality compared to those people who were in the lower end of happiness. So it looks like happiness not only pays off initially, hey, you get to have a good time, but there are health benefits of happiness as well. So the question I'll put to all of you, and I want you to think about this, is what would it take right now to make you happier? Okay. You're laughing. Maybe you've got a good idea. Okay. All right, we'll get that. Well, I'll tell you what, let's make it almost like a multiple choice question. How about a new job, a raise, losing weight, getting married, a new lover, a baby? These are not in causal order. An extra bedroom, winning the lottery, more flexibility at work, How about that? Oh, we haven't hit you yet. How about a new car, a cure from a chronic illness? How about you're given an award, looking younger, you're more attractive, your child is excelling at school, you could finish college if you haven't, or you could go back to college. Okay, as you look at that list, okay, can you find at least one thing on that list you think will make you happier? Okay, yes? Raise your hand if you can find one thing on the list that you think will make you happier. Well, we got a holdout here? You're playing hard to get? What's it going to take to make you happier? For God's sake. Okay, all right. Okay. Most people can find one thing on the list. And you know what? I've got good news and I've got bad news. Okay, what's the good news? The good news is the chances are if that thing happened, you would be happier. The bad news is the chances are it won't last long. What do I mean by that? Is we tend to adapt to all these kinds of things that happen to us and often have a tendency to gravitate back to where we were. In fact, when you look and analyze the determinants of happiness, the things that really generate our happiness, they've done identical twin studies. And some of the twins are raised together, they're genetically identical, and some are separated at birth. And it turns out that helps us predict the fact that about 50% of our happiness is in our genes. It's genetically determined. So I've got good advice for you. Pick happy parents. Okay? Now, for those of you who no longer have that choice, I count myself among them, we have to focus on the other half of the pie. Okay? Namely, about 10% of our happiness, on average, is determined by our life circumstances and events, like all those things on the previous slide. You know, the new job, the raise, the baby, and so on. All those things are the things that happen around us, and it turns out they affect our happiness, but not as much as we would think. What really is the sweet spot? It's our moment-to-moment thoughts and actions. It's what we do, what we think, that determines how we feel. And that determines about 40% of our happiness. Now, I'm going to tell you the truth. I know very few people who have fully optimized their thoughts and their actions to produce happiness. And what we're going to focus on today are some of the small things that you can do to optimize those thoughts and actions and increase moment to moment your happiness. So, here's the viewpoint on healthy pleasures. You see, human beings evolved over millions and millions of years, and our ancestors learned to avoid those things which were uncomfortable, painful, because they were potentially toxic or lethal, and to seek out things that were pleasurable, because that was a sign they were often doing something that increased their individual survival or the survival of the species. And so, in a sense, we evolved to seek out pleasurable things. The bottom line is actually feeling good is good for you in terms of health and survival. Now, the moment I say that, I'm sure some of you are going to think, wait a minute, what about unhealthy pleasures, right? You know, for example, I have a patient, he likes 1.5 quarts of scotch a day. Ample evidence, believe me, that that's bad for his brain, his liver, his relationships, and so on. I have other patients who love to smoke. They enjoy it. Well, it turns out there's ample evidence again, smoking's hazardous for your health. Most of the unhealthy pleasures are recent evolutionary experiences. That is, hey, give us about another 5 million years, maybe we could adapt to 1.5 quarts of scotch a day or even smoking. You know, people who are resistant to it, hey, they learned how to do it, they pass on those genes. Now, I don't know about you. I don't have another 5 million years here, and neither do my patients. So the good news is we can guide them to some of the pleasures that they evolved to enjoy. And in doing so, that's our heritage. That's naturally what we were born to enjoy and indulge in. And when we do it, we get better health as well. All right. So, of course, since I'm a physician, primary care practice, I have to write a prescription, right? So here's going to be our prescription for healthy pleasures. We're going to first talk about savoring your senses, really enjoying your senses and the pleasure and health benefits of that. Then we're going to talk about some really practical things that you can do to practice happiness throughout the day. And finally, we're going to talk about something really interesting. Is sometimes the best way to improve your health and happiness is to forget your health and happiness and indulge in altruism, or caring for or about something outside yourself. And we'll get to that. So let's talk about savoring your senses. I want you to imagine that you've arrived in a small cafe. You arrived and you have nothing to do, and you notice that there's a couple sitting across from you looking rather romantic. So you decide you'll do a little scientific survey. You're going to count how often the couple touches each other. So you get out your napkin, you get out a pencil. Every time they touch, you put a little hash mark down on your napkin. He lays his hand on top of hers. Oh, that's sweet. Little hash mark. An hour has gone by. You have filled up 5 napkins with hash marks. This couple has touched each other 180 times. Now, the question I ask you is, what country are you likely to be in? Well, let me narrow it down. Are you in San Juan, Puerto Rico? Are you in Paris, France? Are you in London, England, or Gainesville, Florida? Any guesses? Okay. Hard as it is to believe, psychologist Sidney Girard got a grant to roam the cafes of the world and sit there observing how often these couples were touching each other. Here are his results. San Juan, Puerto Rico, 180 touches per hour. That's pretty good. Paris, France, still a very respectable 110 fondles per hour. And that's what you could observe only above the table. Hey, we're in Gainesville, Florida. We're down to a measly 2 touches per hour. And in London, England, sorry, dear, off to the loo, bye-bye now. They never touched. Now, this psychologist got a grant. I was trying to apply for a grant to replicate this study, but I decided instead of getting a grant, I'd get a life and actually sit in the cafes and so on. Now, it wouldn't be a problem, except touch is actually a vital nutrient. It's essential for healthy growth and development. And in fact, I see a lot of patients, especially older patients, who come into the office, and one of the things that they're suffering from, it never gets named, is skin hunger. That is, they never get tactile stimulation. It's pretty sad when the only touch in somebody's life are the doctor's examining hands or my stethoscope. So it turns out that there's been a lot of research now done on the benefits of touch and massage. And Tiffany Fields at the Touch Research Institute, University of Miami, has published a lot of controlled studies. She started with preterm infants. And we used to have no-touch policies. You know, we didn't want to tax their immune system, their cardiovascular system. And then we found out if you would just gently stroke and touch these premature infants and cuddle them and so on, they actually grew better, they survived better, they got out of the hospital sooner. And that's now been applied through pregnancy and childbirth, diabetes, asthma, post-traumatic stress, eating disorders, migraine, low back pain, HIV, breast cancer. Now, I don't want you to think that massage is a cure for all those conditions, but it does help with coping and adaptation. Now, that reminds me of a funny story. So, I'm traveling with my wife outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. And set in a hillside is a spa called 10,000 Waves. Now, have any of you ever heard of it or been there? Okay. It's a beautiful Japanese spa. I called ahead. I reserved a hot tub and a massage for my wife and I. So we soak in the hot tub. We get all relaxed. We walk into the massage room, and there's 2 masseuses standing there. Now, let me describe them to you. All right, so one of them is this guy. He's about 6'4". He's got long ponytail, blonde ponytail, tied back tight. He's got a tight white T-shirt on, muscles just rippling and fasciculating under the T-shirt. He had an 8-pack. I could count the whole thing. Okay. Standing next to him is this beautiful 5'2", long, flowing, auburn-haired woman with eyes dark. You could just melt into them. She was lovely. He says to my wife and I, do you have any choices about who goes with who? You can imagine my dilemma here. I mean, I'm trying to weigh the pros and cons and do decision analysis and construct a grid. Well, if I go with him, at least I keep his hands off my wife. But then I don't get to be touched by her. You know, I'm in decision paralysis, okay? I'm not sure the right answer. My wife needs no decision analysis. She knows immediately, and she says, I will go with her. Him. Well, let's do a little scientific survey. Okay, so how many think she chose him? Raise your hand. Okay, how many think she chose her? Raise your hand. Well, that's really interesting. She said, I will go with her, leaving me with this bruiser. Well, he pulls a thin curtain across the room. There's 2 massage tables. Within minutes, he has me on the massage table, his hands around my neck, throttling me, and then saying in a voice loud enough to be heard all across the United States, Sir, if any of this is too hard on you or is hurting you, just tell me and I'll lighten up on you. Now, do you imagine that I'm going to humiliate myself in front of my wife? No, you brute! Get your hands off me! Yeah. Now, you know, my wife's right on the other side of the car. No. I let this guy beat me up for a full hour. I was praying the whole time that I had only paid for a 30-minute massage. No, it was a full hour. He pulls back the curtain. My wife steps off the massage table, radiant, relaxed. I hobbled off the table. I could barely walk. We were supposed to go for a hike the next day. For 3 days, I could barely walk. So I want to be very clear. She got the Healthy Pleasures massage. I did not. And my advice to you, if ever faced with this choice, choose her for Healthy Pleasures. Well, it's not all about just enjoying the sense of touch. It's also what we see. And remember, we evolved surrounded by nature, and we actually give it up at considerable cost. Now, for example, could you imagine the following scene? Patients admitted to a hospital by the same surgical team for the same kind of operations to the same hospital. One group looks out their window and they see a lovely wooded tree scene. The next group, by the luck of the draw, same hospital, same surgical staff, same procedures, looks out their window and they see a brown brick wall. Would you think that looking at nature versus a brown brick wall would make a difference? Well, it turns out they've done the study. And when people look out at nature, they have less distress, they recover more quickly, they use less of the strong pain medications, and they even get out of the hospital 1 day sooner. Again, we evolved to look at nature, and that's restorative to us. Now, it turns out they've identified something now called nature deficit disorder. I love that. And it's because we're the first generation in humanity that could actually spend most of our time indoors. And among children, there's a movement now called No Child Left Inside. This is the first generation of children that could be raised indoors where essentially video screens, video games, and so on are replacing nature in terms of their visual environment, and at considerable cost. Now, what about chocolate and taste? Well, it turns out I could give this whole talk just on the benefits of chocolate. There's a study that the Brits did, and they found that those who enjoyed candy, and most of it being chocolate, had a 27% lower relative risk of death and lived nearly a year longer to enjoy their chocolate. Taubert has done studies of patients taking dark chocolate and blood pressure goes down, sometimes as much as the use of medication, although we don't have long-term chocolate studies. What about in men? They enjoyed a 47% lower relative risk of death if they enjoyed chocolate, and if you're a woman over the age of 70, hey, you only need to have chocolate once a week in a small amount, and that is associated with 35% less likelihood to be hospitalized or have death from cardiovascular or heart disease. Now, that brings me to this little Hershey's Kiss. Now, all of you, when you came in, were given a Hershey's Kiss. I hope do you have it available? Okay. Can you find your Kiss? Okay. Now, if you don't have a Kiss, you can imagine a Hershey's chocolate Kiss. It works almost as well. Now, what I want you to do is imagine that this is the last piece of chocolate on earth. I'm sorry, folks. This is it. This is the last chance you're going to have to enjoy chocolate. With that in mind, I want you to feel the weight of this Kiss. It's not nearly heavy enough, is it? Now, I'd like you to smell through the wrapper that Kiss. And slowly undress your piece of chocolate. Now smell that wonderful earthy aroma of chocolate. It has like 400 different flavor notes compared to, I think, 6 or 8 in strawberry. We love that complex, rich aroma. And now remembering that this is the last piece of chocolate on earth, the last time you get to taste chocolate, I want you to take the smallest bite of chocolate you can. And now I invite you to put the whole piece into your mouth and notice at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, chocolate goes from a solid to a liquid state. And it gives you that wonderful mouth feel. Now, why am I doing this? Well, because Hershey's pays me an enormous amount of money to do this. No, it's not true. I have no conflict of interest to disclose. I'm doing this to help focus our attention on the ingredients of pleasure. What has to be there for pleasure to occur and happen? And the first thing is you need a good stimulus, something like a piece of chocolate. Then you need good senses. You know, if your sense of smell isn't working, you have a bad cold, you can barely enjoy the chocolate. But you need a third ingredient, and that is mindful attention. That is, for pleasure to happen, somebody has to be home to enjoy the pleasure. And if you think about it, most of the day, we're on an automatic pilot. You know, you sit down to eat something, you taste one bite, you go, oh, that's delicious. And then that may be the last time you thought about the taste of that food through the end of the meal. This happens again and again, even with a massage. You sit down to get a massage and suddenly you find your mind wandering 1,000 different places instead of staying focused on that massage. I'll give you another example. Not too long ago, I finished taking a shower, and while I was toweling off after the shower, I suddenly became aware of the feeling of that terry cloth towel on my skin. I did a quick calculation. I've probably taken 10,000 showers in my lifetime. 9,999, I didn't pay any attention to the towel. Guess what? Pleasure cannot happen unless someone is present to enjoy the pleasure. So I challenge you, okay? The next time you take a shower or a bath, okay, I want you to think about taking that towel and for the full 30 seconds, 60 seconds, however long it takes you to towel off, I want you to think about nothing else but to concentrate of the feeling of the towel on your skin and see what a difference that experience is. If we want pleasure to happen, we have to be present. You have to be present to win, as they say. So, I can hardly talk about sensory pleasures and so on without talking about sex. Is it okay? Am I allowed? Is that all right? Okay. So there was a study that was done by the Brits, and it showed that the risk of death in men who had sex twice or more a week was half that of men who had had sex less than once a month. Now, that was after controlling for age, social class, smoking, blood pressure, pre-existing heart disease. So it wasn't just the sick men not able to have sex. Well, I cannot tell you how excited I was. So I made a slide of this. I sent it to our AV department. I had a beautiful graphic there. And they said, where do you think you're going with that? Because this is the way it came back to me. And I called them up. I said, you know, I'm going to talk about healthy pleasures, and sex is part of that. And I've had nice graphics on other slides. What happened here? They said, you can't go in public with that slide. I'm sorry. You know, not with Kaiser Permanente's name on it. So I pleaded with them, and the best they would do is this. That's what they would let me know. So. Well, I can't tell you how excited I was when this study came out. I went to the British Medical Journal website. I downloaded the PDF of this study, and I emailed it immediately to my wife. I could not wait to get home. So I arrived home, and I said to my wife, I said, hey, did you read your email today? She said, yes. I said, did you see the one I sent you? Did you read that study? She said, yes. I said, do you realize 2.5 times a week, we're already behind? And I said, and you realize you could save my life. And she looked at me and she says, David, you're going to die. The second area that I'd like to focus on with you is not just savoring your senses, but how do you practice happiness? How do you do the kinds of things that really boosts your mood and increases your vitality? And some of it is enjoying your senses, but there's more to it. So, what about sleep and siestas? A small Greek study came out, and it showed that men who took a siesta when compared to those who didn't were 30 to 50% less likely to have been hospitalized for a heart attack. Well, it was a small study, and that's why I was pretty excited when they expanded the study to 24,000 people followed over 6 years. What did they find out? First of all, those who took an occasional nap had about a 12% reduction in coronary or heart disease mortality. Hey, those who took a frequent nap, the reduction was 37%. Now, I actually find that very reassuring as a presenter and speaker. And the reason is my specialty is preventive medicine. And as I look out in the audience today, I see that I'm practicing preventive medicine. Those of you who are getting a little nap right now, I'm reducing your cardiac risk. However, I'm going to warn you, after about an hour, I'm going to wake you up, because after that, the curve starts to go back up and you lose the benefit. So if you're going to take that siesta, limit it to 30 to 60 minutes, but not more. Let's come back to that rating your life satisfaction and happiness on a scale of 1 to 10. When most people complete this, they're somewhere around a 6 or a 7. Now, it turns out some people are a little higher, some lower. Well, I want you to imagine that you just won the state lottery, and you just won $25 million in the state lottery. And I come to you and I say, would you rate your overall life satisfaction and happiness? What do you think you'd be? 10 plus 11 off the scale. Okay. Now, here's the interesting thing. 1 year later, I come back to you and I ask you to rate your life satisfaction and happiness after winning $25 million in the lottery. What do you think happens? Well, it doesn't happen to everyone, But there is a tendency 1 year later for lottery winners to drift down to where they started or even a little bit lower. Now, why could they possibly be lower? Well, it turns out after winning $25 million, a lot changes in your life. You notice friends and relatives start to drop over your house a little more frequently, often with their hand out. The car that you were really satisfied and happy with, oh, it's not good enough. A new model is out. You've got to get that. You've got to move to a new house. It disrupts social relationships. Turns out that happiness lies in narrowing the distance between where we think we ought to be and where we see ourselves. The narrower that distance is, the happier we are. And it turns out sometimes after winning $25 million, it just escalates your wants and you can almost never catch up. Now, there's one group of people, again, there are exceptions, who after winning the lottery are measurably happier. Can you guess who those people would be? Poor people. Poor people. It's interesting. If your basic life needs are not met, then getting more money can make you feel happier, more secure. Not with everybody, but on average. The other answer to that question is the IRS. They're usually measurably happier after you win $25 million. All right, so it's really important that we understand a few fundamental things about money because a lot of people are very confused about the relationship between money and happiness. And I have to tell you, it's not a simple story. It's not as easy to say money won't make you happy. In fact, the science that's coming out on it shows it's a pretty complex relationship, and it varies a lot. But let me share with you 3 important things to understand about money and happiness so far. First of all, happiness is not happiness. There's 2 types of happiness. We'll talk about that because money affects those different types of happiness differently. Second thing is money can give, but money can also take away. And we'll talk about some of what you give up when you get money and how you spend the money. Not just the fact that you have money, how you spend it also differentially determines your happiness. So shall we take a quick look at that? All right. 2 types of happiness. First one is global life satisfaction and happiness. It's like how satisfied are you with your life? How happy in general are you? And it turns out that that type of happiness does tend to increase with increasing income. However, the other way of measuring happiness is that moment-to-moment emotional happiness, experienced happiness, the joy in your life every single day. And the interesting thing here is that does tend to increase up to, the evidence suggests, about $75,000 of total household income. And after that, it looks like marginal returns, that more money does not seem to bring more of that joy and emotional happiness into people's lives. So that's the first thing to understand about money. The second is money can give and take away. It turns out that our ability to savor, remember how we were doing the thing just savoring and tasting chocolate, or looking at nature, or getting a massage, the ability to really savor and experience that, that is a good predictor of happiness. And money tends to increase the tendency that you might have to take those small things in your life for granted and not really savor, relish, and enjoy them. And finally, money impairs the ability of people to savor. And let me show you one clever study that was done to look at this. So, they're going to give people chocolate, and they're going to watch how they eat the chocolate. But before giving the chocolate to one group, they show them just a slide with a big stack of money on it. Now, you wouldn't think that just seeing money, nobody's giving you money, you're not getting it, just seeing it is enough to change your ability to enjoy chocolate. Well, here's the question. Which of these 2 subjects has just seen a big stack of money? Well, it turns out that the one on the left, the tentative enjoyer of chocolate, just nibbling at it, she's just seen a large stack of money. The woman on the right-hand side, who is devouring her chocolate, has not seen the money. Just seeing money changes our internal calculus and our perception and causes us not to relish and savor as much. Now, I do want to admit that the woman on the right has a bigger piece of chocolate. That may contribute to her enjoyment. The other woman looks a little doubtful. Just viewing money, participants were less able to savor the experience. So, right now, if I were able to give you $500, and you could spend it on anything you wanted, the only thing is you had to spend it. That is, you couldn't save it, you couldn't pay off debts with it. How would you spend the money? Give me an example. What would you spend the money on? Anybody? Yes?
Shoes.
Shoes, okay. Okay, good. What else?
Trip to Disneyland.
A trip to Disneyland.
Taking your grandson to Disneyland.
Taking your grandson. What else? $500. You got to spend it. Hey, come on.
Massage and a dinner.
Ah, choosing her or him. Okay, couples massage. Okay, anything else?
Christmas gifts.
Christmas gifts. Okay. Well, it turns out when you look at how people spend money, it usually falls in one of two buckets. There are materialistic purchases. That's the clothing, the shoes, the stereo equipment, the iPad, etc. And there are experiential purchases. And that's eating out, going to a concert, a spa, traveling, and so on. And how we spend the money actually affects happiness differently. What happens with materialistic purchases? Oh, you got a great pair of shoes, okay? You go to a party, and darn it, somebody else is wearing the same shoes. We tend to compare material things with other people, and they depreciate often with envy. And guess what? You just bought that iPad too. Apple just introduced the iPad 8. And it has more RAM. It has forward-facing cameras, sideward-facing cameras. And that lovely thing that you had is suddenly depreciated. Materialistic desires are associated with more difficulty in achieving happiness in life. Now, experiential purchases often make the person and the people around them happier, and they increase a sense of vitality and connectedness with other people. And finally, and this is interesting, spending money on others is more likely to make you happier. They did a study. They gave people $5 or $20, and the only agreement was you had to spend the money within 24 hours, you had to record your mood, and you had to record what you spent it on. Those people who spent the money on themselves were not as happy as those people who spent the money on others. And it didn't matter if it was $5 or it was $20. That led to this wonderful cartoon where a guy is saying a new study says that spending money can buy happiness if it's spent on someone else. And she says, well, then let's go to the mall and make you happy. All right. Does anybody have a dollar bill? I want to show you a little demonstration. Okay. Dollar bill, just a single dollar. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. We got a dollar bill. I'm going to lay it here on the ground. You're walking through a shopping mall, and you notice a dollar bill on the ground. Oh, you look around. Is anybody fumbling with their purse or something? I mean, you're not going to steal a dollar bill. You're looking around. There's nobody around. You pick it up. You go, oh, my lucky day. I just found a dollar bill. Huh. And you put it in your pocket. Now, would you think that finding a single dollar bill would make you measurably happier with your spouse or significant other? Would you think that finding a single dollar bill would make nuclear war less likely? Would you think that finding a single dollar bill would make you more confident in your refrigerator or your car and you'd buy the same brand again. Well, it turns out those are all true. We don't actually experience the world directly. We experience it through a set of sensory filters, the limits of our senses, but also a set of cognitive and emotional filters. When we are in a good mood, oh gosh, something lucky just happened. I found a dollar bill. That colors our emotional filters, and suddenly the world looks differently, and we look differently. Nuclear war is less likely. We're happier with our spouse or significant other, and that refrigerator, rock solid. Now, the problem is it doesn't last long. That is, that emotion, that feeling of luckiness, oh, I am so lucky, that doesn't last long. And that's why it's so important to populate and fill your daily life with the very small pleasures. The towel on the skin, the smile of a child, finding a dollar bill, giving a dollar bill to another person. Does that count as giving? No. Well, maybe it was yours to begin with. You have to populate your day with those very small things that change your whole perception of the world around you and your perception of yourself. We'll give you more examples of some quick things that you can do that. But one of the best ways is humor, okay? Milton Berle said laughter is an instant vacation. And I love this quote from a 17th century physician, Thomas Sydenham. He said, "The arrival of a good clown exercises more beneficial influence upon the health of a town than 20 asses laden with drugs." Now, I approached our pharmacy. I thought that would be a great banner to put over the pharmacy and so on, but I haven't had any takers. So where do you find the humor? Well, the humor is all around us. For example, they prescribed to patients who had had a heart attack, just watch a 30-minute humorous video once a day. And they found they had fewer irregular rhythms, their blood pressure was lower, they had lower stress hormones, they required less medication, and though it was a small study, they had 1/5 the rate of recurrent heart attack. Now, is that a tough pill to swallow? Just watch a funny movie. Or talk to kids. It's the best way to get some humor. For example, they interviewed a bunch of kids to find out their advice about love, okay? So they asked a bunch of kids, what do most people do on a first date? Now, Mike, age 9, said on the first date, they just tell each other lies, and that usually gets them interested enough to go for a second date. How about, why does love happen between two particular people? Well, I love this response from Harlan, age 8. I think you're supposed to get shot with an arrow or something, but the rest isn't supposed to be quite so painful. Or they asked, how can a stranger tell if two people are married? Great advice here. Derek says, you might have to guess based on whether they seem to be yelling at the same kids. Now, you have to understand, at this moment, while you are laughing, nuclear war is less likely, you're happier with your spouse or significant other, and boy, that car is so good you'd buy the same brand again. But remember, it won't last. And that's why you have to find the ways to fill your day with those very small pleasures that boost your mood and change your perception. Well, it turns out that being present makes a difference. Remember, we talked earlier about how it's important. Somebody's got to be home to enjoy the pleasure. Well, they did an interesting study about mind wandering, okay? And they had a bunch of people who had iPhones, 2,200 people. And they beeped them randomly throughout the day, and they asked them, what are you feeling right now? What are you doing right now? And are you thinking about something other than what you're doing? The results are interesting. About 50% of the time, when we're walking around doing things, we're thinking about something else. we're not present with what we're doing 50% of the time. Second, people are happier when their mind is not wandering whether they're doing a pleasant or unpleasant activity. Now, that's kind of astounding if you think about it. In other words, if you're on vacation in Hawaii, sitting on the beach, got a chi-chi next to you, sipping it, and you're miles and miles away thinking about something else, pleasure really isn't happening there on the beach. And so, therefore, it turns out what people are thinking, where their mind is focused, is actually more important than what they're doing. And so we think it's about filling our lives with just vacation all the time and so on. But the other way to happiness is actually focusing on whatever you're doing in that moment right then. You are more likely to be happy. So, what's one of the greatest distractions, annoyances in most of our lives? Hey, it's the telephone ringing. I'm not sure exactly that I understand the psychology of it. You can be doing almost anything, and that telephone rings, and people instinctively reach for that telephone. I'm not sure. Do you think somebody's calling you up to give you $1 million? You just won the lottery? You know, or something bad has happened and you don't want to miss it. But it's compelling, and it often distracts us. It's often annoying. Well, Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist priest, wrote a beautiful little suggestion about how to flip that 180 degrees, how to take a distracting telephone ring and convert it into a call to be present, to smile. And so here's what he said. On the first ring, smile, breathe. The second ring, you smile and you breathe. And then on the third ring, you be fully present as you pick up the phone and answer it. I ask you, unless you work in the emergency department or the fire department or something, can't you let the phone ring 3 times? Look at the gift you're giving the other person at the end of the line when you actually answer it and you're fully present with them. And look at the gift you're giving yourself. You've taken something that has been really kind of annoying, a stress provoker, and you've flipped it 180 degrees, and it becomes a cue to relax, to smile, and to breathe. So it doesn't take hours. It sometimes takes just moments of a couple of phone rings, call you back to yourself, smile, breathe, enjoy the moment, be fully present, and answer the phone. Next time the phone rings, try it, unless you work in the emergency department. Okay. Remember I told you we don't experience the world directly, but through a series of cognitive filters, mental filters, emotional filters? Well, one of the great filters is rose-colored glasses. You see, most of the stress in our life is not the things that happen to us. It's the stories we tell ourselves about the things that happen to us. We often take little minor annoyances and we make all kinds of assumptions about them. We elaborate on them. Somebody says something to you very casually and suddenly you take it as a personal affront, an insult, or they never liked me, and it starts to grow, and that causes a lot of stress. Well, it turns out optimists, people who tell themselves positive stories, that it's not all their fault, that whatever bad is happening isn't going to go on continuously and apply to all areas of their lives. Optimists, they tell themselves more empowering stories, and they're healthier. They recover from surgery more quickly. They are less likely to get heart disease or heart attacks. And here's the good news, folks. You can actually eavesdrop on your internal narrative, the story you're telling yourselves, and you can change it to a more positive, empowering one. Let me give you an example. How many lectures or presentations do you think are going on here right now? 1? I would bet that the whole time I'm talking, unless you're a Zen monk or something, the whole time I'm talking, you're sitting here talking to yourself. You're sitting there chatting, you're going, oh, that's kind of interesting. I wish my spouse was here to hear that. Where do I get the PDF of that sex file? I want to email it to somebody. Other people are thinking, oh my God, he actually sees patients? He's kind of loony, isn't he? Other people are thinking, I wish I would have peed before the talk started, because now I really got to go. And other people are thinking, I was fine in the bladder department until he mentioned that. That's all I can think about. The truth is, the whole time I'm talking, you're chatting to yourself. You're chatting. Here's the good news. Those who are saying, this is fabulous. This is a great talk. I can use this stuff. I want to share it with people, and so on. Those optimistic, positive stories, your immune system is at least temporarily working a little better. Probably your risk of heart disease just went down a little bit. And those people are sitting there mumbling and grumbling, I can't wait for this to be over, and this doesn't make any sense, and so on. Exactly the opposite. But the stories that you tell yourself can actually be shifted and changed. So let me give you an example. I'm traveling with my son. At the time, he's about 8 years old. We go into a very expensive hotel restaurant to get lunch. I'm trapped in the hotel for a conference. There's no place else to go. We sit down and we look at the menu. Now, I don't know how you are. When I look at the menu, I look at the food, and I also look at the prices, okay? And I do a little weighing and balancing and so on. My son looks at the menu, and it's like he has loss of half the visual field. He can see the food. He cannot see the prices. It doesn't somehow show up in his brain. So he looks at it, and I'm looking at this menu. It's outrageous. This is so expensive, and we're just trying to have lunch, for God's sakes. So he looks at the menu and goes, Dad, I'll have a bowl of clam chowder. I quickly look, clam chowder, I look over at the price, $12.95 for a bowl of clam chowder. And I'm thinking, that's outrageous. I quickly glance down the prices. It's the cheapest thing on the menu. I'll have a bowl too. So I'm thinking to myself, this better be damn good clam chowder, I'm telling you. 2 bowls of clam chowder arrive at the table, one in front of him, one in front of me. I take 1 spoonful of the clam chowder, and it's gritty. It has sand in it. They can't even wash the darn clams, and they have the nerve to charge me $12.95 for a bowl of sand. Waiter, come over here. And in fact, bring the manager. I'm getting pretty heated. My coronary arteries are going into spasm. My gastrointestinal tract is on full alert. I look over at my son. He's sitting there eating his bowl of clam chowder with a big smile on his face. I go, what's up, bub? He says, Dad, this clam chowder is so fresh, you can still taste the sea in it. Think about that. Same bowl of clam chowder. I'm nearly having a coronary of self-righteousness, and he's having the time of his life eating the clam chowder. What's the difference? The difference is the stories that we tell ourselves. The difference is also I'm paying for it. No. That is. But the question I put to you is, how are you going to eat your bowl of clam chowder? What story are you going to tell yourself about your bowl of clam chowder? And can you find a story to tell yourself that allows you some way to enjoy, relish, and savor it, because that's associated with happiness? And just for an added touch, the next time you're really stressed out about something small, just ask yourself, how important will this be at the end of the day? How important will it be at the end of the week? How important will it be in a year's time? And if that doesn't lighten you up, you've probably got a hold of something that's really important and you ought to work it through. But otherwise, it lets a lot of the stuff go. So just imagine the next time you're stressed out, just get this perspective. We're just this little speck, okay? And whatever that little event was that was annoying you, in the total scheme of things of your life, of the life of the universe, is probably pretty small. And that just helps change the cognitive frame, helps relax you a little bit, and enjoy life. So the last area, the last part of our prescription, is indulging in altruism. And let me give you an example. These are some quotes. Afterwards, I always feel calm but energized. It gives me a warm, glowing feeling and almost physical sensation in my chest. I was hesitant at first. Now I can hardly live without it. It's what gives my life meaning. I find it relieves my arthritis pain better than any medication, and it gives me a chance to forget myself. Who are these people and what are they talking about? Any guesses?
Volunteers?
Hospital volunteers. We interviewed a bunch of hospital volunteers, and this is what they told us about their experience of helping other people. So it turns out that one of the greatest tricks of evolution, if you will, one of the greatest surprises, is sometimes the best way to improve our own health is to forget our own health, and actually to forget ourselves and stop focusing on ourselves and obsessing about ourselves and focus on caring for or about something or someone outside of ourselves. It can be pets, it can be plants, it can be people, it can be the planet, it can be religion, but something that gets the attention and focus off of ourselves, caring for or about something outside of ourselves. For example, what about pets? How many of you own pets? Okay, well, listen, I just want to tell you, when I went to medical school, pets were bad news, okay? You know, you could get bitten by a dog and maybe get rabies, you could get cat scratch fever. If you had a parrot, you could get a rare lung disease called psittacosis. Never seen a case. Okay, so why would people own pets if all these bad things can happen to them from having pets? Well, it turns out that pets may actually be good for us. First of all, they do connect us with nature. And remember, again, we evolved in nature. And the other thing is they did a large survey of people who had had a heart attack, and they asked them a simple question, do you own a pet? And later on, when they analyzed it, they found out that people who owned pets, when compared to those who didn't, had 1/5 the rate of recurrent heart attacks. Now, the interesting thing is you probably think, it makes sense. You own a dog, you go out and walk the dog, you get some exercise. Exercise is good for your heart, lowers your heart disease risk. All that's true. And I think we ought to encourage people to walk their dogs. It's a great encouragement for exercise. But it turns out in this study, it didn't matter what kind of pet you owned. It could be a dog, it could be fish, it could be a python. It didn't matter. It didn't matter because it wasn't the amount of exercise you were getting. It was somehow the fact that you were responsible and connected for some other living thing. And that seemed to be protected. Oh, the other interesting thing about this study, in this study, you were better off with a pet than you were with a spouse in terms of heart attack risk. And, you know, that sort of makes sense when you think about it, right? You know, I'm sorry, but pets give you non-judgmental acceptance, and that's very hard to find in a spouse or significant other. So another way of connecting with altruism and what really feeds us is a simple exercise. This was developed by Emmons and others up at University of California of Davis. And they did a very simple thing. They asked people at the end of the day, for 2 weeks, just take a journal, a piece of paper, write down 3 to 5 things that happened during that 24 hours, that day, that you're grateful for. So just make a daily list of things you're grateful for. And it doesn't matter if it repeats something that happens on a previous day. You just have to think, did I notice something I'm grateful for in the last 24 hours? And you write it down. Another way to do that is just to make a list of things you take for granted all the time. And they found that people who made this list were measurably happier, at the end of the 2-week period, and it actually extended. And we're actually healthier by a whole variety of measures. Now, it's not a hard thing to ask to do. Now, I tried this exercise myself. And you can imagine yourself. You're sitting down at the end of the day. You're writing out the things you're grateful for. Of course, you're going to feel in a good mood because you're thinking about all those wonderful things. What I hadn't anticipated is what happens throughout the day. You see, this day is about half over. Okay? I'm already starting to get a little anxious right now because I'm going to face this blank sheet of paper in less than 8 hours, and I've got to come up with 3 to 5 things that happened today. And I'm starting to think, oh my God, can somebody do something that I can be grateful for? Oh my God. And what happens is your antenna go up and you begin to scan your environment for all those wonderful things that are happening that might go unnoticed. All the people around you who do things all the time that you appreciate, but you don't let them know it and you hardly notice it. And so what it does is it changes that cognitive filter. Instead of seeking out all those stressful things that happen in everybody's day and finding that you can bitch and moan and complain about them, here you're like a heat-seeking missile, a laser. You are scanning constantly, trying to find those things that are happening all around you that you are grateful for. And so it's not just at the end of the day when you're writing. It's the whole day long you're looking and seeking out those things and celebrating them and bringing them into consciousness and enjoying them. Now, a further exercise has been done, and we've given each of you one of these little Live Well, Be Well cards, note cards, blank note card inside, and it says Practice Happiness. And on the back side of the card are the instructions, okay? And it's a real simple exercise. Now, truthfully, you don't need to have one of these note cards. All you need is a piece of paper, okay? Because somebody once said to me, well, I didn't do this exercise because I lost the note card. All right, well, how about a piece of paper? All right? Here are the instructions. When you look down your list of things you're grateful for, the chances are certain people are going to pop out. Okay? Now, some of them could be, I had a wonderful piece of chocolate. Okay? I enjoyed a towel. But often it's associated with other people. So, I want you to think about somebody in your life that you're really grateful for. Okay? And the exercise is to write them a brief note to let them know how grateful you are for them. Now, I have a suggestion. The more specific you make that note, okay, the stickier it is, the greater emotional impact it has on the person. So, for example, let's see, I noticed David sitting here. So, David, if I wrote you a note, I said, David, you're a great IT person, and God, I'm sure grateful that you work with us. Okay? So David gets that note, he reads it, and he goes, oh, well, that's kind of nice. Thank you. But if I wrote to David and I said, you know, David, you're a great IT person. I really appreciate working with you. And what I most appreciate is you actually talk in plain language. That when you explain things about the computer, I can understand it, and that's a gift, and thank you. When you write a note like that, it really has stickiness. So it means you really have to notice what specifically you appreciate about the people around you. The trick is, and I'm going to ask you if you're willing to commit to do this, is can you think of somebody? You know, at the end of a life, when somebody dies, the biggest regrets that people have are, did I let them know, and did they know how grateful and appreciative I was of them? Don't wait till they die, okay? This is seize the day. Now's the time. So here's the question. Are you willing to commit in the next 24 hours to take this card or any piece of paper, find somebody, and, you know, if it's part of employee wellness or the people you work with, surely you can find some people that you work with that you just want to let them know how much you appreciate them. If it's not somebody you work with, it can be a family member, it can be a teacher that you once had. I wrote a note the other day to a teacher I had 25 years ago, and I quoted him from a lecture he gave and showed him that what he had taught me had stuck with me and really made a difference in my life. He was so appreciative. And then when you write this note, I want you to watch how you feel when you write it, okay? And if you get a chance to observe the person receiving it, that's even more special, okay? So here's the challenge. Are you willing to commit in the next 24 hours to write a note to somebody you work with, somebody you know, somebody who taught you, some family member, somebody that you're grateful for? If you are, would you hold up your card? Okay. Hey, that's pretty good. Okay, remember, if you don't have your card, you can use any piece of paper. It's more powerful, I think, I'm not promising, if it's actually written now and not sent as an email. But truthfully, if you're going to do it any way you'll do it. See how you feel when you're writing it and see how much the person on the other end appreciates it. So, one other thing that you can do that's really easy is kindness is actually contagious. Happiness, kindness, gratefulness increases in your life if you just sit down at the end of the day and not just count the things you're grateful for, count the acts of kindness that you did during that day. Where did you do something that was kind for somebody else? And it turns out that if you vary the acts of kindness, do different things, that turns out to be a greater boost to your happiness. So just noticing the kind things that happen around you or the kind things that you do is enough to bring that in, again, changing that emotional and cognitive filter to get you focusing on the good things that are happening all around us. We've had a prescription today for healthy pleasures, okay? We want to combine both happiness and health, and I think it can be done. And I think there's good evidence. We've talked about savoring your senses. We've talked about some techniques to practice happiness. And we've even talked about how the best way to improve your happiness often and your health is to focus on caring for about someone else. And we've talked about things that most of them take a minute or two. Not a huge amount of time. There are lots of resources for you that can help you. As part of Kaiser Permanente and Live Well, Be Well, the employee wellness program, we have a website called, surprisingly, kplivewellbewell.org. And you can find lots of these kind of mind-body resources there. There's health coaching programs for stress. There's relaxation, depression, insomnia. We've got podcasts there. You can also visit your doctor's homepage and access many of these health tools. We also now have telephonic wellness coaching, which is available to all of you for stress, exercise, nutrition, weight, and smoking. And you can just call up, schedule an appointment at your convenience, and do telephone coaching. We have behavioral health education programs, stress, mind, body, depression, anxiety, anger management. We've got anger management is very popular here in California, incidentally. Couples communication, chronic disease, and lots of programs on fitness and movement. There's also employee assistance, mental health services, and financial planning workshops. All these resources available to help you bring more healthy pleasures into your life and more healthy perspectives. There's also books. There's wonderful resources now that you can read about the how of happiness or happier. I've done a book called Healthy Pleasures and another book called The Mind and Body Health Handbook with a psychologist, Robert Ornstein. And my final prescription for you. Spend money on others, play with your pet, eat chocolate mindfully, savor a bowl of clam chowder, watch funny movies or nature programs, write thank you notes, read books on happiness, and log on to kplivewellbewell.org. So to finish up, we're going to come back to where we started. Remember we started and I asked you on a scale of 1 to 10, in the past hour, have you smiled, laughed, or felt happier? On a scale of 1 to 10, if you can remember where you were an hour ago and where you are now, has anybody here gone up 1 point or more? That's great. That makes me feel great, but it won't last. It will not last. And that's why you have to find the ways of changing your thoughts and actions daily, moment to moment, to be present, to notice those wonderful people and things around you, to celebrate them, to bring them forward, to laugh. Those are the things that will build your happiness more than the great events in your life or the things that happen to you. So, thank you for your attention, and may you live well and be well. Thank you very much. Thank you.